Let's check in on the nimble family in Germany. Look at little Ben. Tomorrow, the family would leave Germany and first go to England. There they would board their boat to the United States. Ophelia and Richard were so excited to soon be reunited with their family. They hoped Ben wouldn't get seasick. Once they arrived at their port, the weather was rainy. They felt hopeful for sunnier days soon in New York and were excited for their growing family. They couldn't wait for Ophelia's and Webster's kids to get to grow up together. They gave a big kiss goodbye to their life in Germany, then boarded their boat, a British passenger liner named the Titanic. Good luck, passengers. We'll spin the wheel to see if they survive later. Winona was a bookworm and loved to read Webster's novels. But Italia was more concerned of her daughter learning to cook to be a good wife. Winnie aged up into a child. A proper sim needs a dressier wardrobe. Italia worked on both of her girls learning how to do chores. Though Winnie still acted out as a child and made messes around the house. But she would always get caught by her father and May to clean them. Webster set up a club of potential suitors for Winona like Elizabeth had done for him. Winona spent time getting to know the guys. Webster also had dinner with them all to get to know if any were worthy of Winona. One boy named Alec caught Winona's interest. Time for 3 crying babies to turn into 3 screaming toddlers. Inquisitive Willow. Independent is fitting for an heir. Clingy Will. Willow. Wyatt. Will. Ophelia had a lot of baby kicks while on board the boat, but she and Richard enjoyed the fancy dining experiences. Such a sweet couple. On the night of April 14th, 1912, the family headed to their cabin to bed.
Where we began, oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again. Damn, who knew all the planes we flew, good things we've been through, that I'll be standing right here talking to you.
Around 11:40 p.m., they found a large shake that woke them both out of their
But
sleep.
something told me that it wouldn't last. Had to switch up, look at things different, see the bigger picture.
Richard told Ophelia to stay in the cabin and he'd investigate. Back in New York, Webster received mail from Ophelia that she mailed out before she left. She told him they would be on a boat named the Titanic and expected to reach New York on April 17th. She asked him to be at the landing dock for them. He later headed to the general store in town for the latest copy of the New York Times newspaper. There he read about the Titanic that hit an iceberg and sunk 4 hours later, killing over 1,000 people. He ran home to tell Italia in a panic. She was in the middle of cooking dinner when he told her everything. He had no idea what to do and how to find out if the Nimbles made it off of the boat. Italia was scared for her in-laws and little Ben. Did Tim Nimbles make it on a lifeboat? Let's find out. For Ophelia and Ben, since women and children would be kept together. They made it. Now for Richard.
First you both go out your way and the vibe is feeling strong. It was small, turned to a friendship turned to a
He made it
bond, and
too.
that bond will never
Webster worked around the house to distract himself from the Titanic. Dirty boy. He also hugged his family extra tight, hoping one day he could hug Ophelia again. Look how cute Willow is, though. The next morning, Italia read the newest New York Times newspaper. An English ship named the Carpathia picked up hundreds of Titanic survivors and was on its way to New York. She rushed to tell Webster when he got home from work. He boarded a train that same day to head to Pier 50 for where the newspaper said the boat would be arriving today. He felt incredibly anxious waiting for passengers to disembark. A large wave of relief washed over as Ophelia stepped off the boat. He was also hit with sadness by not seeing Richard or Ben. But then to his relief, Richard appeared with a toddler who looked just as Ophelia described in her letters. Webster couldn't believe how lucky the whole family was to make it off the boat and be rescued and safely brought to New York. He celebrated his reunion with his sister with the tightest hug he could muster, then brought the family back on the train and to his home. Italia had been waiting all day by the window, so when she saw everyone appear, she headed outside. A reunion she prayed for but never thought possible. We had a lot of birthdays during my posting break. Winnie.
Round guilty eyes and little white lies. Yeah, I played dumb, but I always knew that you talked to her.
Willow.
Maybe did even worse. I kept quiet so I could keep you. And ain't it funny how you ran to her the second
Wyatt, a good
that
heir.
you called it quits? And ain't it funny how you said you were friends? Now it sure as hell don't look like it. You
Will is me. Maybe bitter he's not the heir. This should be an interesting storyline. Webster and Italia also aged to fully grown adults. The Nimbles got settled into the new home in New York. Ophelia also finally gave birth. She was thankful labor waited until she was safe.
I know if you were true, there's no damn way that you could fall in love with somebody.
Webster's childhood friend, Malcolm Landgrab, recently immigrated to the U.S. and came to visit. He told Webster his son, Bill, was looking for a wife, and Malcolm thought Winona would be a good fit. Webster agreed the arranged marriage was a good idea and was happy to help his old friend. He brought up the plan to Winona but didn't give her a choice. She hated the idea. She already was smitten with Alec. Webster ignored her feelings and chaperoned her on a date to introduce her to Bill. Winona immediately felt no attraction to Bill. However, since her hand was already promised to him, he was strong with his romantic feelings. With Malcolm and Webster's blessing, despite Winona's feelings, he proposed that same day. Winona felt forced to accept the proposal. She knew if she said no, her father would be upset and would ruin his friendship with Malcolm. So reluctantly, she accepted the proposal. Webster was so excited he and Malcolm's children would be wed. Italia greeted them when they arrived home. She had no idea what Webster had done. Winona rushed to her room in tears. Italia asked Webster what was wrong. He told her about Malcolm's son and how he promised Winona's hand to him, and he proposed. Italia was shocked no one told her and asked how Winona felt. Webster said she was very unhappy but would learn to love him one day. Italia was furious. She reminded Webster how he felt when his mom tried to marry him off to Cassandra Gott. He told her this wasn't the same and he was setting up a good life for their daughter. Italia called him a hypocrite and told him he sounded exactly like his mother. They argued for hours. Italia told Webster to sleep on the couch and leave her alone for a while. Italia avoided Webster for days, often leaving rooms when he entered. The night before the wedding, Winona visited Warren's grave. She begged him if he had any kind of mythical control to stop the wedding. The morning of the wedding it poured, symbolizing Winona's mood. Here is our bride. The weather cleared in time for the ceremony. Winona refused to kiss Bill during the ceremony. He settled instead for a hug after the ring exchange. Webster arranged a fireworks show after. He tried to apologize to Italia for not including her. She yelled at him how unhappy Winona would be forever, and it was all his fault. Winnie introduced herself to boys at the wedding. She wanted to quickly court someone she chose before Webster forced her into a marriage too. Bill welcomed Winona to her new home that Malcolm purchased for them. He told her they needed to consummate the marriage. Winona pretended she didn't feel good to get him to hold off. While Bill went to get his belongings from his parents' home, Winona snuck Alec over. She didn't want to lose her virginity to Bill. She instead wanted it to be special with her real love. Later, when Bill returned, Winona pretended to be busy making dinner. Bill saw right through it. He told her as a wife she has no right to refuse him and demanded she follow him to the bedroom now. She reluctantly followed him, scared he'd tell her father. The marriage was consummated. Italia channeled her anger into knitting after the wedding. Webster channeled his anger from fighting with Italia into writing. Willow confided in Winnie her fear of an arranged marriage and asked if their dad would ever do the same to them. Winnie told her to focus on finding someone she loves when she becomes of age before Webster picks mate. Her own advice would come too late. With whispers of a great war coming, Webster was eager to get Winnie married off. He introduced her to their neighbor, Louis Maynard. He promised Louis that Winnie was a pure, nice girl and great wife material. Louis wanted to make sure his bloodline would be secure if the war came to the U.S. and agreed to the arrangement. Winnie complained to her mother as soon as she got home. Italia was disappointed but not surprised Webster did this again behind her back. It was very taboo for women to speak out against their husbands, so Italia couldn't do anything but disapprove quietly. Webster arrived with Louis and asked Italia to give them alone time as Louis had an important question for Winnie. Louis told Winnie he thought she was beautiful but was uncomfortable marrying her against her will. He knew though if he didn't, Webster would just find someone else. He asked Winnie to marry him, but he'd never force her to consummate it unless she wanted to. Winnie was shocked at his kind gesture and accepted. She knew one day she could love this kind man. Louis, our new kid. Meanwhile, Italia and Webster hashed it out again. She demanded to know why he continued to force their daughters into unwanted marriages. Webster tried to explain the upcoming war made him anxious for the future, so he needed his daughters to have something stable. Italia argued their family was all the stability they needed and to let them fall in love naturally. Webster realized he was wrong and truly apologized to her. Italia told him he needed to apologize to Winona and Winnie. Despite Webster's change of heart, Winnie proceeded with the wedding. She was touched by Louis saying he'd never force her to do anything, and knew most men in town weren't like that. So while Webster picked him, Winnie chose him herself. I already love them, and Enkinda said she's not the heir. They had a small wedding at the Kenleys' home with family and friends. Mr. and Mrs. Maynard. Here is her bridal fit. The triplets also aged up to teens. Willow. Wyatt. Will. The U.S. officially entered the Great War, and the men were drafted. Will and Wyatt were drafted now that they were 18. Webster was as well. Italia was sad to see Webster go, especially since their relationship was rocky. Willow was going to feel incomplete with her other two triplets both going off to war. Will had a mischievous plan to put Wyatt in danger so he could return and be heir. Willow knew she needed to try to find a mate with men who hadn't left for war yet, so Webster couldn't arrange a marriage. When he returned, Italia was so sad to see her baby boys leave. Childless couples got a chance to try for a baby before the men left. Winnie was starting to fall for Louis and said if it was the last time she ever saw him, she wanted to consummate the marriage. Louis was grateful for her and hoped his family would grow even if he didn't return. They had a tearful goodbye. He gave Winnie a rose and promised to return by the time the last petal falls off. She told him she loved him for the first time. Bill also made Winnie try for a baby before his departure. She prayed to not become pregnant. He gave her a big kiss upon leaving. She told him good luck and hurried him off. Later that evening, Alex stopped by. He told Winnie he had to see her one last time before he left. She asked him to come inside to spend time together. They two spent an intimate moment together as Winnie prayed for his safety in war. Richard was also headed off to war. Ophelia made him promise to return to her and sent him off with a kiss.
I told you that I never would. I told you I changed. Even when I knew I never could. Know that I can't find nobody else as good as you. I need you to stay.
The men all arrived to their camps before being sent to different areas of combat. Good luck, gentlemen. Each man will get their own spin on the wheel to seal their fate.
Nobody else as good as you. I need you to stay.
to learn the soldier's fates. We'll start with Webster. Each soldier will eat the cake. The wheel will decide if they eat it again.
I swear I meant to mean the best when it ended. Even tried to buy myself
R.I.P.
when you started
Webster.
Now you're texting
Next
all
up,
my friends,
Alec.
asking questions. They never even liked you in the first place. Dated a girl that I hate for the attention. She only made it 2 days with a connection. It's like you'd do anything for my
Alec lives.
affection. You're going all about it in the
Next is Richard.
ways. I was into you, but I'm over it now. And I was trying to be nice, but nothing's getting through. So let me spell it out. A, B, C, D,
R.I.P. Richard.
and your sister and your job and your broke ass car and that shit you call art. Fuck you.
Next up is Bill.
That I'll never see again. Everybody but your dog, you can all fuck off. No, 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 no.
R.I.P. Bill.
A, B, C, D.
Next up, Lewis.
Said you just needed space, and so I gave it. When I had nothing to say, you couldn't take it. Told everyone I'm a bitch.
Lewis survived.
Blame it
Up
always
next
had
is
to put
Adam.
yourself above me. I was into you, but I'm over it now. And I was trying to be nice, but
Adam lives.
getting through.
Next is Wyatt. Thank God the heir lives. Last up is Will. R.I.P. Will. War survivors must pick one of the following traits: gloomy, hot-headed, clumsy, lazy, squeaky. The Great War was over, but Winona went into labor alone before the men returned. A girl? Let's see who the father is. It's Alec. A few days later, Alec returned home and went straight to see Winona. She saw him outside the window and went outside to greet him. He professed how he couldn't stop thinking of her and came home to her. She brought him inside and introduced him to her daughter. He immediately noticed the baby had his eyes and knew this baby must be his and not Bill's. He told Winona about Bill's passing, but she barely even acknowledged it. She was so happy Alec returned. Winnie learned painting while home alone. She was surprised when the front door opened and Lewis was home. He was just as surprised to see she was heavily pregnant. Right as he put his hand to feel the baby, Winnie's water broke. He had a small panic, then went to change into something comfortable so he could help Winnie give birth. He cheered her on through every contraction. A boy. Willow saw Adam through her window and ran out to see him, ignoring the heavy rain. He told her he promised to return and would never break his word to her. She gave him news that she was pregnant. Adam was so excited. Wyatt returned home. Italia recently aged into an elder. She was so excited to see him and asked if Webster and Will would be home soon. Wyatt had the difficult job of breaking the news to Italia. He tried to beat around the bush and told her war stories. He then came out with it and told Italia that Webster and Will did not make it. She was in disbelief. Lewis came over and had Webster and Will's belongings that he returned to Italia. Wyatt crossed a beautiful woman in the park one afternoon. She introduced herself as Jessa Berkeley. Wyatt thought she was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Her attraction to Wyatt was mutual, and they ended up going on many dates together. After only a few days of knowing her, he asked her to officially court. She agreed. Relationships usually moved faster back in this generation, so their whirlwind romance was common. Wyatt felt like she was his soulmate. He never got along as well with anyone as he did to Jessa. He did steal a kiss or two from her from time to time. They spent every day together for months. Italia got along with her well. She loved her as a daughter already. Their union had her approval when Wyatt was ready to propose. Wyatt also got along well with Jessa's parents. One afternoon when Jessa stepped out, he asked both her parents for their blessing to wed Jessa. Her mother, Mildred, accepted with no hesitation.
Let's start right now.
Her father, Thomas, did make Wyatt promise to always honor Jessa and be true to her, protect her, and cherish her. When he told Italia his plans, she gifted him her ring to pass down and use to propose. The spooky family moved to a new graveyard, and some family members came to visit. Italia grieved at the grave of Warren. Wyatt came as well to support his mother. WTF Wyatt. After that nearly fatal shock, Wyatt quickly headed home. Italia was in disbelief on how lucky Wyatt was to live, but knew she needed to head inside to safety too. When they arrived home, she checked in on her baby boy. She told Wyatt to take it easy the rest of the day. He agreed that was a good idea. Jessa came over immediately when she heard what happened to Wyatt. Italia was happy to see her and told her Wyatt would be very comforted by her presence. She headed upstairs to see him. He was relieved to see her. He told her he was fine, but she insisted he get back into bed. When they sat alone together on his bed, things began to heat up more than lightning. They began kissing over and over. They had never made out before, and this was considered scandalous for the time period. Wyatt stood up and said if he didn't stop now he wouldn't be able to soon, and he wanted to wait until marriage for intimacy. The next morning he went to her home and realized he didn't want to wait much longer to spend every moment with Jessa. He proposed in her parents' backyard. Jessa said yes. They were so excited to start their lives together. Wyatt and Jessa spent many weeks planning their dream wedding together. They decided on a spring wedding. They also toured homes as they decided not to inherit the current home. At the wedding, Italia and Jessa's mom, Mildred, helped her get ready. Winnie and Willow helped Wyatt get ready. The wedding then began and everything was perfect. Wyatt felt so lucky to get to marry the most beautiful girl in town. Jessa also felt lucky to marry a man who truly loved her and start their lives together. Mr. and Mrs. Kenley. They hired a pianist for the wedding and enjoyed dancing together to the music. Alec and Jessa's father, Thomas, also seemed to really enjoy the music. Wyatt headed home to get all of his belongings before moving. Italia said since she will die soon, she wanted to pass all the family photos down to Wyatt. Wyatt didn't like talking about her dying but accepted the photos. He and Jessa then headed to their new home. They took in a moment to enjoy their new journey they were beginning together. The Kenleys consummated their marriage. Jessa spent weeks tirelessly working on her cooking skills to be able to feed the family. She was loving being in the kitchen. Wyatt loved being the taste tester for all of her delicious creations. Though recently, while cooking, strong scents would make Jessa sick, Adam and Willow came over to the new home and spent time with the Kenleys. Though while they were visiting, Willow went into labor. Adam was freaked out and wanted to get her home immediately to labor there. Jessa did her best to keep up with work around the home, but it felt like everything made her sick. So she ended up spending a lot of time in bed as she felt all movements made her vomit. One day when she worked up enough energy to clean the kitchen, Wyatt came in to check on her. She tried to downplay her illness so he wouldn't worry. He asked her how she was feeling. She pretended she felt great as shown by her moving around and doing normal activities. She then was interrupted by a wave of nausea and had to run to be able to make it to the toilet in time. Wyatt came in and told her enough was enough. He was taking her to her father, Thomas, who was a doctor, to find out what was wrong. Jessa agreed. She desperately wanted relief from vomiting. They headed off together to the hospital. At the hospital, Wyatt was so scared something was wrong with Jessa. She fell asleep. She was so exhausted from being sick. Thomas came in and greeted his son-in-law. He explained the tests he ran showed Jessa was pregnant, but she was suffering from hyperemesis gravidarum. Jessa woke up and Thomas went to explain the diagnosis to his daughter. He explained it meant severe vomiting in pregnancy and she would be at high risks of dehydration constantly. He wanted. When they returned from the hospital, Jessa immediately got sick again. Wyatt cleaned after her so the smell wouldn't make her sick again. He then made her get in bed to relax and promised to do all the household chores. Jessa knew she needed rest, so followed his instructions. Back at Winina's home, Justina aged up to a toddler. She's so cute. Alec and Winina both love being parents, and Justina was such a good baby. One night, Alec put Justina to bed. He then went downstairs and asked Winina to go out to the backyard with him. She was confused but agreed and followed him outside. He asked her to stargaze together. They enjoyed just the quiet together as they tried to find the brightest stars in the sky. Alec pointed out a particularly shiny star and asked Winona if he wanted to see something even shinier. She agreed. He stood and pulled out a ring from his pocket, asking her to marry him. She was so excited to finally get a wedding she wanted. They married a few weeks later in a small, intimate ceremony as Winona didn't want it to be anything like her wedding to Bill. Mr. and Mrs. Armstrong. Italia came by the house often to help out. Wyatt didn't like her alone in such a big house, so asked her to stay long-term. She loved getting to help the growing family. She did chores around the house while Jessa rested and Wyatt worked. One afternoon, while Jessa used the restroom, she noticed blood in the toilet. She immediately freaked out for her baby and rushed to see her dad. There weren't many tests doctors could do to monitor the baby, but Jessa's father told her that everything seemed fine, but she needed to go on bed rest. Jessa begged him to reassure her the baby was okay. Thomas told her he can't say for certain, but she was not miscarrying, so that was a good sign. Once home, Jessa stayed in bed and rested. Italia took care of cleaning. When Italia would work up enough energy to get out of bed, she'd still fall asleep everywhere. She was so drained. After a few weeks of bed rest with no complications, Jessa's father lifted her from bed rest. Wyatt celebrated with a family picnic in the park. Winona gave Jessa advice about childbirth and how much of a miracle it would feel like. While Jessa was talking to Winnie and Louis, she felt her water break and labor start. Everyone gathered around her to comfort her and clean up things quickly. Wyatt ran over to Thomas and told him he needed to get Jessa to the hospital now to see what was happening. The family all rushed Jessa to the hospital. Wyatt freaked out as the baby's due date wasn't for another month. Jessa slept as much as she could while her father ran tests. He told Wyatt it was baby time, but it would need to be a C-section as something seemed wrong with the placenta. He asked Wyatt to wait outside as the surgery wouldn't be a pretty sight, and he didn't want him to see Jessa like this. Jessa was so nervous but trusted it would be okay with her dad there. It's a boy. Our next heir. Wyatt was so scared and desperately wanted to know what was happening. Italia did her best to distract him. In surgery, Thomas discovered Jessa had a type of placenta retention called placenta accreta. Her placenta was attached deep in her uterus. Placenta accreta wasn't studied much back then, and Jessa was already beginning to hemorrhage. His only option was an emergency hysterectomy. Once the surgery was over, he moped over his daughter's sleeping body. She didn't know yet what happened, and he mourned her fertility he had to take from her. He went out to tell Wyatt what happened. Wyatt was in shock. Relieved his wife and son were okay, but mourned that they couldn't have any more children. After 1 week, Jessa was discharged home and got to meet her son for the first time. She bonded with him immediately and was grateful she survived to get to be his mom. But alone at night while everyone slept, she couldn't help but mourn the fact she'd never bear more children. Why did this happen right when I hit record? Spot this family can't take much more. Rip good boy.
I know you're somewhere out there, somewhere far away.
Jessa was dealing with baby blues and processing her hysterectomy. Cooking was still one of her passions and distracted her from her dark thoughts. She did her best to still be a good mom and wife.
At night when the stars light up my
Italia was very sad about Spot's passing. He was still an attachment she had to Webster and was now dead too. For how bad of a pregnancy Jessa had, Samuel was such a good and easygoing baby. Wyatt did vent frequently to Italia. He wished he could still grow his family to be large like his parents had done. Italia suggested maybe it was what God intended. The family all gathered to put Spot to rest. Jessa stayed home due to having a newborn and still in recovery from a major surgery. The kids mostly used this time to all socialize together. Wyatt also took the opportunity to tell all his siblings about Samuel as well as ask for comfort for Jessa as she truly needed support from the girls. The girls agreed when Jessa recovered from surgery they'd take her for a night on the town. Italia really struggled. Spot was her best friend and a big connection to Webster she would never get back. Winona also seemed overcome at the sight of Webster's grave, perhaps mourning the relationship they never got a chance to repair. Back at home, Jessa still had a lot of pain at her incision site from surgery, but she would soothe physical and emotional pain with baby cuddles from Samuel. The family also all came over after burying Spot to meet the baby. And Winnie loved him immediately. Why is this pimple demon staring at me? Winnie guessed over the baby, while apparently holding a random block of clay. Ophelia dealt with memory issues in her old age and spent most of the visit asleep. Samuel aged up to a toddler.
Get on my elevator, baby, we're going up. Give me that
Independent like his father was.
can't get enough. So much to discover.
Look how cute.
Stop me now. Every time I touch it, they're front off the ground. Let them go. All the ones trying to get in.
Wyatt also was getting good with the piano. The small family spent many nights just watching him play.
I know we can get high.
The losses in their family also encouraged them to spend more time together. Samuel was attached to his mother and followed her everywhere. Italia spent her days now just relaxing with knitting. She also loved being a grandma. With many grandkids all being toddlers, there was always someone to love on.
Walking upon the ceiling, dancing upon the wall. You and that drug you're dealing should be against the law. All this heat keep rising, make you stop, drop, and roll. I'm bottling.
Wyatt joined the local police force and headed out to his first day.
Let 'em go.
While he was out, Jessa prepped Samuel for his first cousin playdate.
I know we can get higher. There's levels to your love. Yeah, there's levels to your love.
Italia arranged for all the girls to get together with all the grandkids. Winona and Justina, Jessa and Samuel, Willow and Georgie, Winnie, and Walker. Jessa and Samuel headed home before dinner. Italia stayed and spent the night at Winnie's. Jessa was so happy to finally be feeling herself again. Italia was beginning to feel like it was almost her time. Jessa was getting used to the idea of Samuel being her only baby and how special that makes him. When Wyatt got home from work, he and Jessa discussed Italia acting strange recently. She kept talking about going to a light. They had no idea how they'd explain it to Samuel. That evening, Wyatt asked his mom how she was. She told him she lived a good life and felt ready to go. The following morning, she told Jessa she dreamt of Webster saying he was coming to get her soon. Jessa knew this was serious, so arranged for portraits with all the grandkids to remember her by. Just as predicted, that evening, while admiring the flowers outside, Italia saw a large light and walked into it.
Walking around with my little rain cloud.
Rip Queen Italia.
And it ain't coming down. Where do I go? Give me some sort of sign. You hit me with lightning.
Samuel was too young to understand and didn't understand where his grandma was and why she couldn't play with him. A few days later, mourners held a funeral for Italia. Wyatt gave a beautiful eulogy in honor of his mother and thanked her for her influence on the family. Family then headed to the gravesite after the funeral for a private burial. The family mourned Italia for months, but things picked up when it was Samuel's birthday. Wyatt enjoyed the last moments of his boy as a baby.
Theodosia writes me a letter every day. I'm keeping her bed warm while her husband is away.
All the other grandkids aged up, Justina first since she was the eldest, then Walker, then Georgie. Winnie showed up pregnant to the party. Finally, it was Samuel's turn to age up to a child. A cheerful heir will be a nice change for this family that seems to attract death. Here he is.
There are things that the homilies and hymns won't teach you. My mother was a genius.
Everyone enjoyed celebrating together and enjoying Jessa's delicious chocolate cake.
Just a legacy to protect. Death doesn't discriminate between the sinners and the saints. It takes and it takes and it takes, and we keep living anyway. We rise and we fall and we break and we make.
Samuel enjoyed sitting with the grown-ups while eating and listening to grown-up gossip. For his birthday gift, his parents redid his room to give a more mature feel. Jessa cleaned up the aftermath of the party, while Wyatt gave Samuel a talk on being a man. The next morning, the family ate breakfast together. Samuel was anxious for his first day of school. His parents assured him he'd do great. Then Wyatt headed off for work, and Samuel headed off for school. Jessa worked on some crafts for home decor while waiting to hear how Samuel's first day went.
Hamilton doesn't hesitate. He exhibits no restraint. Takes and he takes and he takes and he keeps winning anyway. Changes the game, plays and he raises the stakes. And if there's a reason he seems to thrive, and so few survived, and God.
Samuel had a great first day and brought home a new friend. Throughout his childhood, Samuel really focused